So I think we have everything here. Welcome, Seema ji. You are late, but you're never too late. You're on time for your panel and also our panel. Our panel, I shouldn't be calling our panel because I was not supposed to be in this panel, but Umang's panel, a panel with about 4 or 5 people is now more like a fireside chat with me, of course, with much lesser knowledge on ESG. So I'm going to rely on Umang a lot more. But before we do that, and now the room is moderately accommodated by people, and I think they've had their coffee, they're hydrated before we bore them a lot more. We'll probably go to Umang, introduce herself and what she does, and then kind of ask her the questions and make life difficult for her. So Umang, why don't you introduce
I look
yourself?
forward to it. Hi, good evening, everyone. I am Umang Pathak. I am a lawyer. I worked in tier 1 law firms like Amarchand and AZB. That was my previous avatar. Pre-COVID, we were incubating corporate governance and ESG as a practice in Amarchand, where I was last there. As the corporate sustainability was evolving in the world, COVID did impact, which now we are thinking with the latest geopolitical and geoeconomic issues that it is no longer relevant. But unlike what we are now seeing, 5 years ago, people thought the same, but sustainability became what it did. So I was convinced, I stepped out, set up my own firm in peak of COVID, and as they say, usually rest is history. My firm does corporate law, niche advisory in ESG, sustainable finance, and now carbon market, which is again something India is going to notify very soon. In the process, we realize there is a lot of work which AI and technology can do for us. So we have also incubated our proprietary technology to do ESG assessments and sort of a command setter for an organization for its legal and ESG management. And similarly, on the other side, for investors to oversee their portfolio to capture sustainability impact of their investment. So that's the long and short of it.
I just hope everybody is able to understand a lot of heavy words that have been said. So I'll come back on the very basics of what an ESG, what could an ESG practice means for a young crowd that we have, or for a mature crowd that we have, which has not started either receiving the kind of services that you offer from an ESG perspective, and what is the regulation around that that will make me more obligated to understand ESG?
So I'll contextualize taking your previous panel discussion in the reference point. Why an in-house GC or a law firm practitioner should equip himself about ESG, because firstly, ESG, let's understand what is ESG. ESG is an acronym for Environment, Social and Governance. It was devised by investment community many years ago, because they started, whenever they looked at a prospective portfolio company, they started assessing that company on ESG parameters. So what does that mean? What is the environment impact of an organization? What is the energy consumption? Is it fossil fuel based or renewable? How do they do their waste management? It is reuse, reduce, or it's just buy, use and sell in the landfill. Similarly, on social impact, from your value chain vendor partners to your own employees to community impact. And governance, how independent your board is, how much of expertise professionally is there, or is it like totally promoter driven, whatever I say, I'm the boss sort of governance practices that happen in the organization. So it's certainly not CSR as we understand in Indian context. What regulations apply? Actually, ESG on business side is called as stakeholder capitalism. Instead of focusing only maximizing profit for shareholders, it is about business do not exist in isolation, and while they take natural and human resources to create products and service, which they go back to to sell to the society, to the world at large. So there is a symbiotic relationship, and a company or a private sector and financial sector is a very integral part of that. So sustainable development or sustainable world cannot exist without corporate and financial sectors buy-in into this. On pure law, it's section 166 of our Companies Act, which mandates the board to act in the interest of its shareholders, its employees, community, and protection of environment. Unfortunately, whenever we do sustainability conversation, we go to CSR, we do some donations, we click some photos, and we add some SDG goals, colorful logos, and our sustainability is done. But unfortunately, that's not the essence of ESG. ESG is one, how do you do your business, your operations, how does it impact the people and the planet, and the products and services that you provide to the people, how positively they impact. Are they are just exploitative and extractive, or? So I'll stop here for you to.
So I understand that if I'm a listed company and there are SEBI rules that apply to me on ESG, if there are, that is, and am I obligated? But what if I'm a private company and I'm into tech space, I'm not manufacturing, I'm not cutting trees, I'm not polluting the climate? How does it affect me as a company which has a sustainable revenue model to apply the ESG rules, and how does it profit me on that? Why should I be spending money on ESG as a private limited company?
So let me give you a few examples. So why I mentioned 166 and not BRSR, because BRSR came much later. 166 was incorporated in 2013. Then MCA made the previous, national voluntary guidelines for responsible business conduct. Taking that, SEBI made a format which was previously BSR, and eventually it took the shape of BRSR. So firstly, let's distinguish between a reporting obligation as a compliance versus business operations, which I tried to explain earlier. This came only for listed companies because, there is a private money involved, public money involved, and the SEBI's role and jurisdiction is very different. What it does is that you disclose it to the world and let the investor make its informed decision. But how do we, and which is actually the theme of our discussion today, whether all these ESG statements that are being made, which is not only till BRSR, it is also by private limited companies by claiming my product is sustainable, it's organic, it is green, it is net zero. So what does all that entail? That you and your company and your products have zero impact on organization whatsoever. To answer why private companies need to do this, because that's where capital is driven. Every investor, whether it's a VC or a PE or an early seed investor or a Series B or beyond, they all do ESG due diligence as part of their normal legal and financial due diligence of a company. We have been able to advise a lot of our startup clients who have been able to leverage premium on their business valuation because of, being on the right side of the conversation. So one is investment, and the second is the customer. If you are supplying in EU jurisdiction, whether goods or services, there is a pre-qualification criteria followed by most organizations, which is where you have to make your ESG disclosures. You have to show that you are sustainable, because EU regulations go beyond jurisdictions to ensure their supply chain of the companies based in EU are also sustainable. That's one. And the other is the carbon border tax, which is what India is negotiating with EU to at least keep MSMEs out of its scope, but I doubt that's going to happen. A lot of EU companies which do business or do manufacturing in India or even other jurisdictions for that matter, they themselves do have to make their product more sustainable by becoming more sustainable companies and integrating sustainability in their operations.
So you said when private equity or private money is invested in a private company, and we're not talking public because now the ESG rules on that, the reporting is clear. So coming to private, right? When private money is involved, they look at more ESG related compliances, if not compliances, then reporting. So what in that reporting or compliances are they looking? How do companies without a format prepare that ESG statement?
So I'll give you a couple of examples, case studies. We were advising a dairy company. It's a startup which has sustainable and impact investors. First, I must say that you become more attractive to investors. Like today, anything climate tech, agri tech, biomass, biochar, these are the words you must be listening, that this is what investors are looking to invest. So being a sustainable company, by trying to create impact on ground, you attract better investors, more investors, and definitely attract more premium. The other, what do these investors see? As I said, there is an ESG checklist that we draw up for, which is specific to the industry, the size of the company and their business model. In that, as I said, on E side, there'll be energy to waste, to hazardous waste, to which is beyond licenses and approval. You may have a, let's say, license to draw groundwater, but your facility exists in a water scarce zone. So what should you do as a responsible company? So these are, beyond legal and licenses and approval obligations. Specific to this company, I must tell you that there were investors sitting that which every tranche of money release was conditional upon companies meeting certain sustainability parameters, which is to have ESG policy, which is to have ESG governance framework, which is to have ESG risk matrix and risk mitigation and management plan. There was an investor which even went beyond companies. So, you source water, the milk from the farmers, and then sustainability parameters at the farm level. How much of a gender, like women farmers are putting in more milk, to how much you are engaging or educating the farmers on their feed composition, that there is less methane emission in the stock, the feed stock that you give to your livestock. So, it's the depth which is specific to an investor when they come. They come riding on these requirements and conditions through their entire, investment term.
As a GC, I would think, what if? So what if I don't do this? Yeah. What is the risk that I'm sitting on? And what if I fake it that I have done? So tell me more on that front. Yeah, I mean, if I've mentioned something wrong to my investor that I've done, I'm more compliant. There are 5 female now dairy persons in my farm while they are not, right? What is the risk? What is it gonna happen?
Okay, so I can only draw comparisons with what happens in the rest of the world. If there is a whistleblower complaint against a listed company in India, and we have seen that, there are cases about it, the 3 law firms in US will sue the company. They will certainly get their, compensation. But here, we will barely even see a regulatory action. So what can happen, there is no limit to it. What does not happen, because, we don't have shareholder activism the way it is in other jurisdictions. Even though having 166 section in our Companies Act, I think Indian companies would have been sued left, right, and center, but it doesn't happen here. We have class action provision from pre-independence era, but how many of such class actions have we seen against companies? So to answer, I mean, this is actually for a company to decide, which is why I said 2 other reasons, which is being capital attractive and be able to compete in the market. But ideally, it's not a high moral issue. ESG sustainability is not high moralistic ground. It is purely how to do business, which brings positive impact to people, to your employees, to the product that you create, which doesn't harm people. And it should not be restricted to a regulatory action or a court, process. that as somebody has to file a PIL or a case. But if you ask me, there is enough actionable reasons for anybody who's negatively impacted to go. Currently, the litigation space for misrepresentation like this, if you make misrepresentation in BRSR, for example, SEBI will definitely can take action. So it is not just get your fancy report made and do write whatever. There is a high risk of litigation, a regulatory action by SEBI. The other thing which has recently come is that consumer authority has, on greenwashing, they have come out with a code. So any ads which are not authenticated and backed by evidence, like you must have seen a case on this mosquito repellent that it is completely natural, but they were pulled up, and the penalty is like 2 years imprisonment to 10 lakh rupees of penalty. Similarly, advertising code has come about on greenwashing. So similar actions are being taken. So it's an evolving space. But as I said, it's no high moral ground. It is absolute business sense to do it, and of course, avoidance of any kind of crisis. So you are sitting on a crisis in making if you don't act.
We are definitely sitting on a crisis that's outside this hotel for sure. Talking about mosquitoes and talking about brainwashing, I've been wanting to ask. No, brainwashing. I mean what I say. Brainwashing and mosquito are two issues that I face on a daily basis. So is this ESG governance only applicable to private companies and not the government? Because the government is also delivering services. The government is into more services and products than one private company put together, right? From road making to delivering alcohol or to selling alcohol to doing everything. The government should and should not be, right? They also operate handlooms, they also operate buses. So there is a lot that the government does. So where is the government in adhering to the ESG governance model that you're telling us? And what is that us as citizens or as people living in the city can do? Can we hold the government accountable, have litigation filed for compensation? Has that happened anywhere else in the world? And what are the ways that we can probably tackle this issue?
So let me answer this in two manners. One is government as a sovereign, and one government as a service provider, which is actually disseminating public service, right? So as a sovereign, as we all know, there is sustainable development goals, there is a Paris Agreement. We have committed, and let's not get into the enforcement whether you will or not. We will, because we are the 4th largest economy now. We are slated to become 3rd largest. We want to be Viksit Bharat by 2047. We have a decarbonized green growth strategy to become net zero by 2070. So all of this, what we need for this is finance. And whether we like it or not, no FDI is coming as a charity to any government. It is coming as climate finance, transition finance, adaptation finance, and it is going into either government as a service provider, which is building infrastructure, or government as the facilitator, which is opening, like how AI missions or semiconductor missions or these kind of things are happening. None of these conversations you will see are without sustainability integration, because this is what we are telling the world. And if the capital is coming riding on this requirement, we cannot not address this. So if you see the policy changes as they are happening, from very industry specific way, I can tell you the EPR has come and its scope is widening by every day. We have made packaging regulations more stringent. The plastic pollution global treaty is still into the discussion and yet to happen, but around plastic recycling, reuse, e-waste, I mean, look at the policy at the fast speed as it's happening. Then on the other side, government as a service provider, You will see railways conversation, which railway used to take government budget as the financing source, has now started taking InvITs, attracting global capital, talking about hydrogen, electrification, new age. Similarly with the road infrastructure, PSUs are taking out bids for ESG consultants. So that transition is quite visible even in the government space to see. So yeah, I mean nobody is immune to this, and this is around what is your industry business model and your business strategy is. You want to go global, you want to create a supply chain for the world, you want your product to be available last mile even in EU and US. We cannot not integrate this, I mean, that's pure business case.
Got it. So talking about Viksit Bharat, SDG, I want to open this fireside chat for Q&A so that, people better than me who know ESG better can ask some very good questions to level. So along with that, a huge round of applause for Umang. How not to get a deal rejected 3 times is what Weber will tell in his next panel. So we'll welcome the next panel now.